The unlikely encounter. Alex had always dreamed of adventure. Growing up on Earth, his life was predictable, mundane, and ordinary. But that all changed the moment he stepped onto the alien planet. The sky above was a swirling mix of colors he'd never seen before, and the air felt thick with the scent of foreign flowers. It was like stepping into another world entirely. He had come here on a trade mission, hoping to make a quick profit. Little did he know, his entire life was about to change. The marketplace was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The stalls were filled with strange, glowing objects, and the alien vendors spoke in a language he couldn't understand. The people were tall and thin, with features that were almost too perfect to be real. But none of them caught his attention like she did. There, in the middle of the bustling market, was an alien woman. Her skin shimmered with an ethereal glow. Her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like a waterfall. She stood still, her head slightly lowered, as if waiting for something. Around her neck was a collar, bright and unyielding, like a heavy chain that controlled her every movement. Alex didn't know why, but something about her drew him in. The way she stood there, so silent, yet so beautiful, made his heart race. He was just about to approach her when he saw a group of alien guards marching toward her. Their eyes were cold, and they spoke in harsh tones. Alex instinctively stepped back, not wanting to get involved, but his curiosity got the better of him. He watched as the guards surrounded her. One of the guards, a tall figure with dark blue skin, spoke sharply to the woman, but she didn't respond. She remained still, almost lifeless, as if she had no voice of her own. It was clear that she wasn't free. "Is she a slave?" Alex whispered to a nearby vendor, hoping for an answer. The vendor glanced at him quickly, his eyes full of fear. "Don't ask about her," the vendor said in a low voice, shaking his head. "No one is allowed to speak of her. It's dangerous." But Alex couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? Why did she have that collar around her neck? His mind raced with questions, but he knew better than to ask any more. Instead, he decided to observe from a distance, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth. Suddenly, without warning, the crowd parted, and the woman was pushed toward the center of the square. The guards made way for a figure who had just appeared, another alien. But this one was dressed in royal attire. His presence demanded respect, and the crowd fell silent. Alex could sense the power that radiated from this man. The alien raised his hand, signaling the woman to kneel. It was then that something incredible happened. The woman, who had been so still, so controlled, looked up at the man with defiance in her eyes. She straightened, and for a split second, Alex thought he saw a spark of life in her gaze. But before he could process it, the collar around her neck emitted a low hum. It glowed brightly, and suddenly, the woman fell to her knees, her eyes closing as if in defeat. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't stand it anymore. Something inside him snapped. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. Without thinking, he rushed forward, pushing through the crowd, his feet moving before his mind could catch up. The guards didn't see him coming. In an instant, Alex reached the woman, his hand outstretched. The collar was glowing brightly now, as if it had a life of its own. But Alex didn't hesitate. With a quick movement, he grabbed the collar and yanked it off her neck. The hum stopped. The woman gasped as the collar fell to the ground, her body trembling. The guards froze, their eyes wide with shock. Alex looked down at the collar in his hand, and for the first time, he realized the magnitude of what he had just done. But it was too late to undo it. The damage was done. The woman stood up slowly, her eyes meeting his. She looked at him with a mixture of awe and disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Alex wasn't sure what to say, but before he could speak, a voice behind him thundered, "What have you done?" It was the royal alien. His face twisted in fury as he glared at Alex. "You've broken the law. Do you know what this means?" Alex backed away, his mind racing. I didn't know. I thought I was helping, he stammered, but his voice was drowned out by the angry murmurs of the crowd. The woman stood by his side now, her eyes locked on the royal figure in fear. Then, without warning, the royal alien stepped forward, his expression deadly serious. By removing that collar, you've claimed her as your mate. According to our laws, you are now her husband. Alex's heart skipped a beat. What? The royal alien's face was stone cold. You heard me. According to the law of this planet, you are now bound to her. You cannot undo what you've done. Alex turned to the woman beside him. She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes, and for the first time, he realized how much he had just changed her life. And his. As the crowd began to whisper and point, Alex's mind swirled. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, who was this woman who had now been bound to him by a law he knew nothing about? The adventure he had dreamed of had just begun, and it was about to take a turn he never saw coming. The law of the collar. Alex stood there, still processing the shock of what had just happened. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The alien woman, now his wife, according to the strange laws of this planet, was silent beside him. She had been bound by a collar that controlled her, that controlled everything about her. And now, somehow, he had freed her, or perhaps cursed himself by doing so. The royal alien in front of him was furious, his fists clenched as he seethed. You've made a grave mistake, human, the royal alien said in a low, menacing voice. The laws of this planet are clear. Once that collar is removed, the bond cannot be broken. You are her husband now. Alex's mind swirled, unable to comprehend what was happening. He had come to this planet for a simple trade deal, not to get tangled up in the web of alien politics or ancient customs. He glanced at the woman beside him, still reeling from the consequences of his action. She seemed lost, confused, and perhaps just as scared as he was. Her eyes flicked nervously between Alex and the royal alien. What? What do you mean? I didn't know, Alex stammered, trying to find his words, his voice trembling slightly. I thought I was helping her. The royal alien's eyes narrowed. Helping her? You have condemned yourself and her to a life bound by law. The collar was not just a symbol, it was a binding contract. To remove it was to claim her as your mate. The law is unyielding. There is no escape. Alex swallowed hard. He wanted to protest, to explain that he hadn't intended any of this, but it was clear that his words meant nothing here. The laws of this world were absolute. The collar had bound her, and now it had bound him too, whether he liked it or not. A loud voice cut through the tense atmosphere. Your Majesty, we cannot let this go unpunished. One of the guards, a tall, burly figure with dark, scaly skin, stepped forward. He was the one who had been closest to the woman when Alex had intervened. His eyes were filled with contempt as he glared at Alex. You've violated our most sacred law. If the collar is removed without proper ceremony, the bond cannot be undone. And now, the consequences are on your head. The royal alien raised a hand to silence the guard. Enough, he said coldly. I will deal with this myself. His gaze shifted back to Alex, his expression unreadable. You are now her husband in the eyes of our people. The law dictates that you must take responsibility for her. You must take her with you, and you will follow the customs of this planet. Alex was stunned. What? Take her with me? I don't even know her name. The woman, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but there was a quiet strength in it. My name is Lyra, she said, her eyes meeting Alex. For the first time, there was a spark of recognition in her gaze. And you are now my husband, according to the law. Her words struck Alex like a blow to the chest. He could feel the weight of her statement, the force of the tradition that bound them together. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. What was he supposed to say? That he didn't want to be bound to her by a law he didn't understand. That he didn't even know if they could trust each other. The royal alien gave him no time to think. He turned and gestured to the guards. Take them both to the council. Let the elders decide what to do with the human. Before Alex could protest, he was roughly grabbed by two guards, their strong hands gripping his arms as they pulled him away. Lyra followed silently, her gaze never leaving Alex. The guards marched them through the market, past curious onlookers who whispered behind their hands, as if watching a spectacle. Alex's mind raced, but the only thing that kept him grounded was Lyra's presence beside him. There was something about her, something beyond the collar, beyond the laws, that made him want to protect her. They were led into a towering building at the center of the city, an imposing structure made of silver and glass. It stood out against the sky, gleaming like a fortress. Inside, the atmosphere was cold, clinical, as though the walls themselves were judging him. He was pushed into a large chamber, and before he could gather his bearings, he was face to face with a group of alien elders. The council chamber was vast, its walls lined with strange symbols and ancient carvings. At the far end of the room sat a group of beings, tall, regal, and yet undeniably intimidating. Their eyes glowed with a strange, almost otherworldly light. They spoke in unison, their voices a deep, resonant hum that sent shivers down Alex's spine. "You have broken the law of our people, human," one of the elders intoned. "By removing the collar, you have made an irreversible decision. This woman, Lyra, is now bound to you. You must fulfill your responsibilities according to the law." Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out. The sheer gravity of the situation had him paralyzed. He looked at Lyra, who stood beside him, her face unreadable. Was she as scared as he was? Was she resigned to this fate, or did she feel the same overwhelming sense of helplessness that he did? "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" another elder asked, her voice sharp and commanding. Alex nodded numbly. "I understand, but I didn't know. I didn't mean to. I didn't want any of this." The elder's gaze softened, just for a moment. "Intentions do not matter in the face of the law. You must accept your new role, human. You are now her protector, her partner, her husband." Lyra's eyes flicked toward Alex. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze, but she said nothing. "You will be bound by our laws," the elder continued, "and you will take responsibility for her. The consequences of rejecting this bond will be dire, not just for you, but for her as well." Alex felt the weight of their words pressing down on him. There was no way out. The law of this planet was ancient, unyielding. He had made a choice, whether he knew it or not, and now he had to live with it. As the council deliberated, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of growing fear. He had wanted adventure, yes, but not like this. He had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. He had just become part of something much bigger than himself. The alien's world. Alex's heart was still racing from the encounter with the elders, but there was no time to process what had just happened. The cold, sterile atmosphere of the council chamber had given way to something entirely different as he and Lyra were escorted to a transport vessel. The sleek, silver craft hummed as it lifted off the ground, carrying them away from the city and toward an unknown destination. Lyra remained silent beside him, her face expressionless as she stared out of the window. Alex had tried to speak to her during the journey, but she had only given him a fleeting glance before turning away. There was an invisible wall between them, one built by customs and laws he didn't understand. The ship descended smoothly, landing in a large clearing surrounded by dense alien trees. The air here smelled different, fresher, as if they were on the edge of a hidden world, far away from the city and its cold legalities. Alex was led out of the ship, Lyra beside him, still wearing the same hauntingly quiet expression. As they walked through the forest, Alex couldn't help but notice the beauty of this place. The trees were tall and twisted, their bark shimmering with an iridescent glow. The plants around them pulsed with strange light, as if alive, responding to the movement of the air. It was a place full of secrets, and yet it felt strangely peaceful, as if nature itself was holding its breath. "This is where I grew up," Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was soft, but there was something in it that made Alex stop and listen. "The forests of my home planet. This is where the collar was placed on me." Alex turned to her, surprised by her words. He had expected her to be cold, distant, or angry at the situation they found themselves in. But instead there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, a look of vulnerability that made Alex feel a twinge of guilt for the way things had turned out. "You grew up here?" he asked softly. "This forest? I thought you were from the city." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I was born here. My people live in the city, but we are from here. The forest is our home. The collar, it was placed on me when I was young, a way to ensure my compliance. The city people, they feared my power." Alex didn't know what to say. Lyra's words made him realize just how little he understood about her world, her culture, or her life. He had thought he was helping her by removing the collar, but now it seemed like he had only scratched the surface of a much deeper and more complicated story. Before he could ask more, a strange noise broke the silence, a low hum that seemed to vibrate the air around them. Lyra stiffened, her eyes narrowing. She raised a hand, motioning for Alex to be quiet. "They're coming." Alex's pulse quickened. Who was coming? He had no idea what was going on, but the way Lyra reacted made him realize that whatever was about to happen, it was important. Suddenly, from the shadows of the trees, figures began to emerge. They were tall, humanoid creatures, their bodies covered in dark, glimmering armor. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but Alex could feel their eyes on him, cold and calculating. He instinctively took a step closer to Lyra, feeling the surge of protectiveness. Whatever was happening, he wasn't about to let her face it alone. "These are my people," Lyra explained, her voice tight. "The guardians of the forest. They are the ones who watch over the land, and they have their own laws." The guardians stopped a few paces away, their leader stepping forward. He was larger than the others, his armor decorated with intricate patterns and symbols that glowed faintly. His voice was deep, resonant, as if it echoed from somewhere far away. "Lyra, you have broken the law," he said, his tone cold and unyielding. "The collar you wore was meant to control you. Without it, you are a danger to us all." Alex's eyes widened. "But I removed it to help her. I didn't know." The guardian raised a hand, silencing him. "You have no understanding of the customs here, human. You do not know the power she holds." The collar was not just a symbol of control. It was a safeguard. Lyra is more than just a woman. She is the last of her kind. Alex looked at Lyra, who stood still beside him, her eyes downcast. "The last of her kind," he echoed, confusion clouding his mind. "What does that mean?" The guardian turned his gaze toward Lyra, his eyes filled with something like regret. "Lyra is the last of the ancients, beings of great power who once ruled this world. Her bloodline was nearly destroyed in the wars of the past. The collar was placed on her as a measure of control, to ensure that she would never awaken the powers she carries within." Alex looked from the guardian to Lyra, his mind spinning. "So, by removing the collar, I've unleashed some kind of dangerous power in her." The guardian nodded gravely. "Yes, the collar was not just a symbol of subjugation. It was a restraint. Without it, Lyra is no longer bound by the rules of her ancestors. She has the potential to change the balance of this world, for better or for worse." Lyra's voice broke through the tension. "I don't want this power," she whispered, her words laced with pain. "I never asked for it. The collar kept me safe. Without it, I don't know what I am anymore." Alex felt a deep ache in his chest. Lyra was more than just a woman he had accidentally claimed as his wife. She was a force of nature, someone torn between the person she wanted to be and the legacy forced upon her. And now, thanks to his actions, she was facing the consequences. The Guardian took a step closer, his eyes never leaving Lyra. "You must choose, Lyra," he said. "If you cannot control the power within you, it will consume you, and the world will be forced to destroy you." Lyra's hands clenched at her sides, her jaw tight with emotion. I don't know how to control it," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I never wanted any of this." Alex reached out, his hand finding hers. It was warm, trembling, but there was something steady in the way she held on to him. "You don't have to do this alone," Alex said softly. "I'll help you. I don't know what we're up against, but I won't leave you." The Guardians exchanged a look, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the leader spoke again. "We will give you time, Lyra, time to decide whether you can control your power. But know this, if you fail, there will be no second chances." The Guardians turned and began to retreat, leaving Alex and Lyra standing alone in the eerie silence of the forest. Alex looked down at Lyra, his grip on her hand tightening. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together." Lyra's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time since they had met, there was a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you." As the two of them stood there in the quiet forest, the weight of the situation hung heavy over them. They were in the heart of an alien world, caught in a struggle far beyond anything Alex could have ever imagined. And yet, as he looked at Lyra, he knew one thing for certain. Their journey was just beginning. Rising tension. Days passed since Alex and Lyra had been thrust into this world, a world of ancient laws and alien customs, a world that neither of them fully understood. The forest that had once seemed so peaceful now felt like a prison, its towering trees and shimmering foliage hiding secrets Alex couldn't begin to unravel. He had hoped that time would give him answers, but instead, it only raised more questions. Lyra's silence became unbearable at times. She would walk beside him, her steps light, but her eyes always distant. The once serene woman who had looked at him with uncertainty now seemed to be carrying the weight of an entire planet on her shoulders. Her past, the power that had been locked inside her, was beginning to emerge. But it wasn't the kind of power that Alex could understand. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and very much beyond his control. As they wandered deeper into the forest, Alex tried to talk to Lyra, but she kept her distance, never letting him in. She would often pause, staring into the thick woods as if she could hear something just beyond the trees, something he couldn't see. It was as though the forest itself was calling to her, trying to draw her in. Alex could feel the tension growing, but every time he asked her what was happening, she would just shake her head and walk away, her face closed off. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest seemed to come alive with strange, whispering sounds, Lyra finally spoke, but her voice wasn't the one Alex had come to know. It was cold, distant, as if she were speaking from another place entirely. "I can feel it," she said, her eyes dark with something Alex couldn't place. "The power inside me. It's waking up. I can feel it stirring every time I close my eyes. It wants to break free." Alex froze. "What do you mean? What kind of power?" Lyra's lips parted, but no sound came out. She was staring at him, her eyes wide, as if the words were caught in her throat. She reached out a hand to him, trembling, but when he took it, she yanked it back sharply, like she was afraid of something. "I don't know what's happening to me," she whispered, her voice raw with fear. "But the more I try to push it away, the stronger it gets. It's like a part of me wants to rise up, and the other part is terrified of what it could do." Alex's heart raced. He had seen the way the Guardians had looked at her, the way they had warned her. It was clear that this wasn't just about her being freed from the collar. It was about something far more dangerous. And now that the collar was gone, there was no turning back. The tension between them was rising, as if the air itself had thickened. Alex didn't know what to do. He had no answers for her, no idea how to help. All he could do was be there, hoping that his presence would somehow give her the strength she needed to fight whatever battle was raging inside her. But with each passing day, he began to realize that the battle wasn't just within her. It was something that could threaten everything around them. That night, as they set up camp by a small clearing, Lyra disappeared into the forest without warning. She had become more and more withdrawn, and Alex had started to fear the worst. He tried to call her name, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice. His worry grew with every minute she was gone, until finally, as the moon rose high above the trees, Alex decided he couldn't wait any longer. He had to find her. The forest seemed alive in the night, its dense trees casting eerie shadows across the ground. The night was still, too still. Alex's footsteps were muffled by the soft underbrush as he ventured deeper, his senses heightened. He felt like something was watching him. But every time he turned, there was nothing. His breath came faster, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Lyra. He called again, his voice echoing in the quiet woods. Lyra, where are you? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of searching, Alex heard something, a soft rustling in the trees. He turned quickly, his heart pounding in his chest, and there she was. But she wasn't the same. Her posture was different, her movements unnaturally graceful, and her eyes, those eyes, were glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Lyra. Alex called out cautiously, taking a step forward. She turned to him slowly, her head tilting to one side. There was a strange, almost predatory look in her gaze now. You shouldn't have followed me, Alex, she said, her voice soft but laced with an unfamiliar chill. You don't know what I'm becoming. What do you mean? Alex took another step, reaching out to her. Lyra, what's happening to you? Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it was cold, so cold that it sent a shiver down Alex's spine. The power is inside me, Alex. It's not just a part of me. It is me. And now I can feel it. I can feel the entire planet's energy flowing through me. The ground beneath Alex's feet trembled slightly, and for a moment, he thought it was his imagination. But when the earth shook again, he realized it wasn't. The forest around them was reacting to her, responding to the strange power that she was unleashing. Lyra, stop, Alex pleaded, his voice desperate. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Something dark, something dangerous. You have to fight this. You're not this power. You're you. Please. For a moment, Lyra seemed to hesitate. Her body trembled, and her eyes flickered back to the human he had come to know. The faintest glimpse of the woman he had met weeks ago flashed across her face, but just as quickly, it was gone. I can't stop it, Alex, she whispered, her voice breaking. I've tried, but it's too strong. Alex didn't know what to do. He couldn't let her go down this path, but he had no idea how to help her. As he reached for her again, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently, and a powerful gust of wind whipped through the trees, knocking him back. Lyra, he shouted, but her eyes had closed, and she was holding her arms out as if drawing power from the earth itself. The forest was alive with energy, and Alex felt a chill run through him as the air around them grew colder. The woman he had once thought of as just a lost soul in need of help was now becoming something else entirely, a force of nature that could not be contained. You have to fight it, Lyra, Alex shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the growing storm. The power surged through her, and Alex realized with a terrible clarity that he might have made a mistake. He had released something far more powerful than he had ever imagined. And now, both of them were going to have to live with the consequences. With one final scream, Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and the entire forest seemed to respond, the trees bending and groaning as if in pain. Alex stumbled backward, feeling the deep sense of helplessness. The power was rising, and he was powerless to stop it. The storm raged on, and Alex could only watch as the woman he had tried to save slowly transformed into something no one could have predicted. The forest was no longer a peaceful place. It had become a battleground. And in the center of it all stood Lyra, her power threatening to tear everything apart. Breaking point. The storm raged throughout the night, the violent winds and rumbling earth making it impossible for Alex to think clearly. He had tried to get closer to Lyra, but the moment he stepped forward, the energy around her surged, pushing him back. Every time he got within a few feet of her, the power that had awakened inside her would flare up, repelling him like a force field. It was as though the very essence of the planet was responding to her, giving her power far beyond anything Alex had ever seen. By morning, the storm had subsided, but the damage to the forest was clear. Trees were bent at unnatural angles, and strange, glowing cracks ran through the earth. The air itself was heavy, thick with the power that Lyra had unconsciously unleashed. As Alex looked around, he realized that this wasn't just about him and Lyra anymore. The entire planet seemed to be reacting to her power. The forest was alive with it, and if something wasn't done soon, the damage could become irreversible. Lyra had collapsed in the clearing where Alex had last seen her. Her once vibrant eyes were now clouded, her breathing shallow. She lay on the ground, her limbs twitching as if the power inside her was still struggling to break free. Her hair, which had once been a shimmering silver, now seemed to pulse with an unnatural glow, and her skin had taken on a faint ethereal hue. It was as if she had become something otherworldly, a creature torn between her human side and the ancient, powerful being that she was meant to be. Alex knelt beside her, his heart heavy with worry. He had never felt so helpless in his life. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she looked at him as if she were afraid of what she might become. She was no longer the woman he had met days ago, the one who had been trapped by the collar, the one who had quietly asked for help. Now she was something different, something dangerous, and the worst part was that Alex couldn't help her. He didn't have the answers. All he had were questions, and every time he thought he was getting closer to an answer, it seemed to slip further away. "Lyra," Alex said softly, reaching out to gently touch her arm. She flinched at his touch, her body stiffening as if she were afraid of what might happen. "Lyra, please, talk to me. I need you to fight this. You can't let it control you." Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, Alex saw the woman he had tried to help, the one with a spark of humanity still left inside. But then the expression in her eyes shifted. The power within her stirred, and her gaze grew distant once more. "I'm trying," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But it's too much. It's consuming me." Alex's chest tightened. He had never felt this powerless before. It wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving them both. If this power inside her kept growing, it would destroy everything around them. The Guardians had warned her, and the forest itself had responded in kind. But what was the answer? How could they contain something so powerful, so ancient? Suddenly, a crackling sound filled the air, and the ground beneath Alex's feet shook once more. He looked up, his eyes widening in horror as a massive figure emerged from the shadows of the forest. It was another Guardian, but this one was different, bigger, more imposing, and radiating an aura of dark energy. The figure's eyes were glowing with the same eerie light that filled Lyra's, and its presence was overwhelming. "You have unleashed the power of the ancients," the Guardian said, his voice deep and booming. "And now you will be held accountable." Alex scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. "What do you mean? We didn't know. Lyra didn't ask for this." The Guardian's eyes flicked to Lyra, who was still lying on the ground, her body racked with tremors. "It doesn't matter," he said, his voice cold. "You, human, have bound yourself to her. And now..." The law of the ancients demands retribution. You've set in motion a chain of events that cannot be undone. Alex's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. What do you want from us? He demanded. We didn't ask for any of this. We're just trying to survive. The Guardian took a step closer, and the ground trembled beneath him. Survival is irrelevant, he said. The balance of this world has been disrupted. The ancients must be contained, or the world will fall into chaos. Lyra groaned softly as she struggled to sit up, her eyes filled with panic. Alex, I don't know what's happening to me, she whispered. I didn't ask for this power. Please, help me. Alex knelt beside her again, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. He could feel the heat radiating off her, the raw energy pulsing just beneath her skin. We'll figure this out, I promise. But you have to trust me. The Guardian watched them silently for a moment, then spoke again. You cannot fight what is already inside her. The power of the ancients is too strong. She is a danger to this world, and to you. The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about saving Lyra. It was about survival. The entire planet was at risk. And no matter how hard he tried to convince himself that there had to be a way to save her, deep down, he knew the truth. They were running out of time. We have no choice, the Guardian continued, his tone grim. The ancients cannot be allowed to roam free. If Lyra cannot control her power, she must be restrained again. Lyra's face twisted in fear at the mention of the collar. She shook her head frantically. No, please, don't put it back on me. I can't go back to that. Alex's heart ached at her words. He knew the collar had been a symbol of oppression, of control. He couldn't allow her to be subjected to that again, not after everything they had been through. But the Guardian wasn't giving them any other options. Lyra, listen to me, Alex said urgently. We don't have time to argue. We need to find a way to control this together. I don't know how, but I won't let them lock you away again. We'll find a way. Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of uncertainty. But I don't know how to control it, Alex. I don't know how to stop it. The Guardian took a step forward, his eyes glowing brighter. Then you leave me no choice. Before Alex could react, the Guardian raised his hand, and the ground beneath them cracked open. A surge of energy shot out, wrapping around Lyra like a chain, pulling her toward the Guardian. Alex lunged forward, grabbing her arm, trying to pull her back, but the power was too strong. No, Alex shouted, his voice desperate. Lyra, don't let it take you. Fight it. Lyra screamed as the energy surged through her, her body convulsing with the force of it. Alex's grip on her tightened, but it felt like trying to hold onto a storm. The energy, the power inside her, was too much. She was slipping away from him, slipping into something he couldn't save her from. But even as the energy wrapped around them, even as the Guardian moved to enforce the law, something within Alex snapped. He wasn't going to let her go. He wasn't going to lose her. I will fight for you, Alex whispered, his voice trembling with determination. I don't care what it takes. I'll fight for you. With that, he pulled her close, and for the first time since they had met, Lyra's eyes locked onto his with something like recognition. There was still hope, still a chance to fight this darkness together. And with that hope, Alex refused to let go. The battle was just beginning. The unexpected alliance. The earth beneath Alex's feet trembled, the very ground alive with a power that neither he nor Lyra could control. The once serene forest had become a battlefield, torn apart by the energies that swirled around them. The Guardian loomed over them, a figure of pure authority and power, his eyes glowing brighter with every passing second. Lyra was caught in the grip of the energy, her body writhing and convulsing as if she were being pulled in two directions at once. Alex's heart raced, and his hands trembled as he clutched her tightly. The energy, dark and relentless, surged through Lyra's body, trying to tear her apart from the inside. Alex could feel her pain, her fear, and it was almost too much to bear. Every time she flinched, every time the power surged through her, Alex's chest tightened. This was more than just a physical struggle. It was a battle for her very soul, and he couldn't let her lose. "We have to fight this," Alex whispered to her, his voice shaking. He wasn't sure if she could hear him, but he knew he couldn't give up. Not now, not when she needed him the most. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, her pupils dilated with fear. "I can't control it, Alex," she gasped, her voice strained. "It's too strong. It's too much." Alex looked at the Guardian, who stood still, watching them with an expression of cold, detached judgment. "Please," Alex pleaded, his voice growing more urgent. "She doesn't want this. We don't want this. Is there no way to stop it?" The Guardian remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Lyra. It was clear that he had no compassion for her struggle, no understanding of the human bond that Alex was trying to protect. He was a force of law, of tradition, and nothing more. But then, something unexpected happened. A figure appeared from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, a tall woman with striking, shimmering skin. She walked slowly toward them, her movements graceful but purposeful. Her eyes, unlike those of the Guardian, were filled with something else, something like understanding. She was not a Guardian. She was different. Her presence, though imposing, did not feel like a threat. Instead, it felt like an opportunity. "You're making a grave mistake," the woman said, her voice rich and calm. Her words cut through the tension in the air like a knife. She was speaking directly to the Guardian, but her eyes never left Alex or Lyra. "This world is not as simple as you think. Lyra is not a weapon, not an object of law. She is a part of something much older, much deeper than any of us truly understand." The Guardian turned to face the newcomer, his expression hardening. "You speak of things you do not comprehend, Maris. The power she carries is beyond control. It is our duty to ensure it does not destroy everything." The woman, Maris, raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by the Guardian's anger. "And what of the power you seek to control?" she asked. "Do you think that power will obey you simply because you demand it? You are not its master, and neither is anyone else. Lyra may be the key to restoring balance, not to destroying it." Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. This stranger, Maris, was saying things he hadn't even considered. Could Lyra really be the key to something greater? Could she really control this power, or was it a force too dangerous to contain? "Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice filled with a mixture of desperation and curiosity. "What do you know about this power? And why are you helping us?" Maris looked at him, her expression softening. "I am someone who has seen the potential for good, even in the darkest of forces," she said. "I understand Lyra's struggle. I know the power that courses through her, and I know how to guide her, if she is willing to accept it." Lyra's head jerked up at the mention of her name, her eyes clouded with confusion and fear. "Guide me," she whispered, her voice weak. "I don't want this power. I don't want to hurt anyone." Maris knelt beside her, her eyes full of empathy. "You don't have to control it alone, Lyra. This power inside you, it's not evil. It's just misunderstood. If you can learn to accept it, you can learn to use it for good." Alex's heart leaped at the thought. Could this really be the answer? Could Lyra really learn to control the power that had been consuming her? The fear that had plagued him for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a flicker of hope. "Help me," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, help me control it. I don't want to hurt anyone." Maris nodded gently. "You are not alone, Lyra. You never were. We can do this together." Turning to Alex, Maris added, "But first, we need to get you both out of here. This place is too unstable. The balance is fragile, and it's being disrupted by the power inside her. We need to take her somewhere safe, where she can begin to learn how to harness her abilities." The Guardian, still standing at the edge of the clearing, clenched his fists. "And if I don't allow this?" he asked, his voice low and threatening. Maris didn't flinch. "Then you will lose. You will lose Lyra, and you will lose this world. This planet is dying because of the laws that bind it. The ancients weren't meant to be controlled. They were meant to be free. If you continue to suppress that freedom, you will destroy everything you've sworn to protect." The Guardian's eyes flicked between Maris, Lyra, and Alex, his anger evident. "You speak of destruction, but it is you who threaten it," he said, his voice growing colder. "I will not allow you to continue this." Maris stood tall, unwavering. "You may try," she said simply, "but you cannot stop what is meant to be." The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment, Alex wasn't sure what would happen next. But then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the Guardian turned away and began to retreat. His footsteps were heavy, each one echoing in the stillness of the forest. "This is not over," he muttered as he disappeared into the shadows. Maris watched him leave, then turned back to Alex and Lyra. "We don't have much time. The Guardian won't be the only one who comes for you. Others will follow, but we'll have a chance if we act quickly." Alex helped Lyra to her feet, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and uncertainty. He didn't fully understand everything that had just happened, but for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like there was a way forward. Lyra, her body still trembling with the remnants of the power inside her, looked at him with wide eyes. "Where are we going?" "To safety," Maris said, her voice calm and steady. "A place where you can learn to control your power, where you can understand what you truly are." Alex glanced at Lyra, taking in her tired, uncertain expression. But there was a spark in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. It was a glimmer of hope, of determination. And in that moment, Alex knew that this journey wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding the true nature of Lyra's power. And ultimately, the power they both had to shape their destinies. Together. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like they were no longer alone. The alliance they had just formed with Maris wasn't just a lifeline. It was the beginning of something new. A chance to control their fate. A chance to change everything. A new beginning. The journey from the forest to the hidden sanctuary Maris spoke of felt like a long, winding road, though it was only a few days' travel. The path was treacherous at times, winding through jagged cliffs and thick, labyrinthine forests. Yet, with every step, Alex felt something shifting within him, a quiet, growing sense of purpose. He wasn't just following Maris and Lyra anymore. He was choosing to fight for them, for her, for both of them. The air was thick with anticipation, and the weight of what lay ahead hung heavy in the silence between them. Each day, Lyra grew stronger, her body beginning to adjust to the power that had been unlocked within her. But with every passing hour, it was clear that she wasn't the same. There was a distance in her gaze, a sadness that lingered like a shadow. It wasn't just the power she struggled with. It was the fear that she might never be able to control it, that it might overwhelm her and consume her entirely. But Alex refused to let her face it alone. He could see it in her eyes. She was still struggling, still afraid. And despite everything that had happened, despite the power that had broken free, Alex believed in her. She wasn't just the sum of her powers. She was more than that. She was Lyra, someone who had been stripped of her freedom, bound by a collar, and forced to carry the weight of an ancient legacy she never wanted. But now, Alex could see the woman she truly was beginning to emerge from beneath all of it. Each night, as the two of them sat by the campfire, Alex would talk to her, reminding her that the woman she had been, quiet, resilient, and strong, was still there. She just needed to remember how to reconnect with it. One night, as they sat around a small fire, Maris spoke of the world they were heading toward. The sanctuary is a place of knowledge, a place where the last of the ancients retreated to learn about their powers and control them. She explained, her voice calm and steady as she stirred the fire. It is hidden deep in the mountains, away from the prying eyes of the guardians and their kind. It's a place of solitude and peace, at least for those who are willing to learn. Will it help, Lyra? Alex asked, his voice filled with both hope and doubt. Maris glanced over at Lyra, who was staring into the fire, her face a mixture of uncertainty and determination. It will help, Maris said, her tone reassuring. But Lyra must be willing to face herself first. She has to accept that this power is a part of her, that it's not something to fear, but something to embrace. Only then can she learn to control it. Lyra's eyes flickered toward the fire. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. How do I accept something that I don't even understand? I've spent my whole life being controlled. Now that the collar is gone, I feel like I'm losing control over everything. Maris met her gaze, her expression soft yet firm. You're not losing control, Lyra. You're gaining it. But it will take time. You have to learn to trust yourself again, to trust the power within you without letting it define you. Lyra's face tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as if she might protest. But then, something in her softened. The anger, the fear, they were all still there, but they were no longer the only things driving her. There was a glimmer of something else now, something Alex recognized as strength. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice quiet but resolute. I don't know if I can do this. Alex reached out, placing a hand on hers. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'll be here for you every step of the way. Lyra looked at him, and for the first time in days, Alex saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, the words heavy with emotion. The next day, the three of them arrived at the sanctuary, a secluded valley nestled high in the mountains. It was breathtaking, the landscape untouched by the hands of civilization. Towering trees with golden leaves stretched high into the sky, and the air was crisp and fresh. The valley seemed to hold a stillness that was both peaceful and sacred, as if time had slowed down just for them. They entered the sanctuary, a massive stone structure carved into the mountain itself. The architecture was ancient, its walls etched with symbols and runes that Alex couldn't understand. But there was a quiet, powerful energy here, a sense of peace that seemed to resonate deep within him. This place has been a haven for the ancients for centuries, Maris explained, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. It's here that the last of the ancients learned to control their abilities, and it's where Lyra will learn to do the same. They made their way deeper into the sanctuary, finally arriving at a large, circular chamber. In the center stood a large stone pedestal, glowing faintly with an ethereal light. Maris motioned for Lyra to approach it. This is where you will begin, Maris said, her voice quiet but full of conviction. Place your hands on the stone. Focus. Let the power flow through you. Do not fight it. Embrace it. Trust in your ability to control it. Lyra hesitated, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But Alex was there, standing beside her, offering his silent support. With a deep breath, Lyra stepped forward and placed her hands on the stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the stone began to glow brighter, the energy pulsing in time with Lyra's breathing. Alex watched, his heart in his throat, as Lyra closed her eyes and began to focus. He could feel the energy in the room shift, the air thickening with power. The stone began to hum, and Lyra's body trembled as if the very force of the power was fighting to break free. But she didn't pull away. She didn't fight it. She held her ground. I trust you, Alex whispered, though he wasn't sure if Lyra could hear him. He wasn't sure if she even needed to hear him. She was fighting her own battle now. Then, slowly, the energy around Lyra seemed to stabilize. The pulsing light of the stone softened, and the air in the chamber grew still. Lyra's breathing steadied, and when she opened her eyes, there was a look of wonder on her face, a realization that she wasn't just fighting the power. She was becoming one with it. I can feel it, Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. It's not controlling me. I can control it. Tears welled up in Alex's eyes as he saw the shift in her. The woman he had first met, the one trapped in fear, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who understood her own power. She had accepted herself. Merit stepped forward, a proud smile crossing her face. "You've done it, Lyra. You've embraced who you truly are." Alex took Lyra's hand, his heart full of pride and love for the woman who had come so far. "You did it," he said softly. "I always knew you could." Lyra looked at him, her eyes glowing with newfound strength. "We did it. Together." And with that, they both realized that this wasn't just the end of one journey, it was the beginning of another. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were a team. They were partners. And the road ahead, no matter how uncertain, was theirs to walk together. As the chamber filled with the light of the stone, Alex knew that they had just begun to rewrite their fate. The power that had once seemed like a curse was now their greatest strength. And in that moment, they understood that they were not bound by the past, but by the choices they made in the present. They were free, and they would create their own future, together.